to Down Your Unders. Down Your Unders. Review and dissection of content from some of the sharpest minds in the game. Hosted by Adam Camilleri. Art of War. Down Under.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode 170 of the Art of War Down Under podcast. I am joined by two illustrious gentlemen intervening on the Emperor's behalf for the Adepta Sororitas to do this index review. Faction is absolutely having a phenomenal resurgence, literally out of nowhere. We did not see this coming. No one saw this coming. And they are literally doing it across many tables in this big wide world of Warhammer that we have. I am joined by two fantastic gents, one of which does resemble Ash Ketcham in name only. He does turn his hat backwards when he rolls his miracle dice, I have been told. His name is Scott Ketcham, and he was the first gentleman, I believe, to get a 5-0 run with sisters in the game. I do also believe that was on War Games live stream if you want to go back and watch it. Scott, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to review the index.
And we're also joined by the venerable Mitch Beard, coming back for, I think, his second or even third time on the show. Hello, brother.
Hi, how's it going, Adam? Love to be back. You've got the pro and the talking head, the perfect pair.
Indeed. Well, Mitch has skewed his ability or his willingness to plug his own show, that being Sister Act, and Scott has put his hand up saying, I would like to do it. Go for it, mate. Tell us about Sister Act 40K.
Sister Act 40K, I think they just completed their 50th, maybe 50.1 episodes of a podcast for Adepta Sororitas enthusiasts. Everything Sisters of Battle, you'll find it in the podcast, talking about tactics, just talking about lore. But also they have a great Discord community where we chat about, anything from hobby to, fun, goofy tactics to winning tournaments. So you should definitely sign up and give Mitch all your money.
Mitch, should we clip it? Because you ain't going to do better than that.
I look, I'm fine. I nearly just spit out my drink when he said Adepta Sororitas enthusiast because I say it at the top of every show. That's very
I
good.
knew you would love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful work. Anyway, for those of you who do not know, Art of War Down Under is predominantly a review-based podcast, and you're listening to this right now. So you are listening to this in with the intent of getting a review-based podcast. We are going to be sitting here reviewing the Adepta Sororitas Index, as we have done, as we will continue to do as we work our way through all these indexes. There is a couple left to at least, and then we'll be having some codexes drop, and we'll be reviewing those when they come, as well as balanced data slates, new mission packs, etc., etc. This is a two-part podcast. First part comes out lovingly for you guys, curated by myself and Seamus Ronan at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesdays. And then the part two can be found over at Art of War Down Under over on Patreon. If you want to jump over there and support me, I would be greatly appreciative. This is 170 of these things, which means there's at least 170 hours of content over behind the paywall, which is kind of ridiculous now that I think about it. But if you would like to get any of that stuff, go over and join us there. And in that part, it will be a Q&A and Tactica with these two lovely gentlemen answering a bunch of Patreon questions. So, jumping in, the Adepta Sororitas gentlemen, we're going to get the hot takes. When you first went through this index, as somebody who adores the Sisters of Battle, what was your first hot take? What was your gut feel back when 10th edition first dropped? We'll start with you, Mitch.
Well, okay, so there's Sisters have definitely had two very distinct phases. There's pre and post data slate. Pre data slate, I remember reading the book and thinking, well, there's a lot of units that don't look as great as they were, especially the melee that we were used to, right? Like Sacrosanct, Repentia, just like a lot of buffs disappeared, and the base stat lines went down as well. And then I tested out and I was like, yup. And unfortunately, I was doing a run up to WTC for Team Iceland, so I had to put them on the shelf and practice my butt off with a different faction. But after the data slate, I think I turned it around, gave it a new eye to the book, and I've been much more enthused. So early days, I'd say, not too hype, but nowadays, post-data slate, it's a very cool faction to be playing right now.
Scott, what about yourself?
First of all, I'd just like to point out that Mitch just admitted that he's a heretic. But
Nope.
as far as the index, I shared a lot of similar feelings to Mitch. I think we felt like we lost a lot of our punch, especially for those of us that were playing Bloody Rose. But even those of us that were playing Valorous Heart with the 30 Sacrosancts, even the Sacrosancts lost their 2-up save. So we felt a little left out in the wind, I think. And initially, I was shifting towards more hulls and tanks and things. And we always had Exorcists always look good, to be honest, I think. But I think after the data slate, where our points improved. But not only that, is I think the top factions kind of were brought down, and now we have a way to compete.
Totally agree. I think my first impressions, because I went over every index lightly, trying to get a little bit of a sense of identity and things. It was an index that didn't seem to do anything well. It did everything mediocrely, and everything it did worse than another power armored faction. Like, it was obviously worse than Chaos Space Marines, obviously worse than regular, index Astartes. And I was like, okay, so they used to be the janky Marine equivalent. It used to be the the Marine army with the kind of Eldar playbook, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, so it doesn't do that anymore. So what does it do? Okay, let's look at the shooting units. Okay, it's an army based off Melter. Well, Melter sucks. Well, by default, because every other toughness has now outstripped Melter's strength. So, okay, Melter sucks. Okay, cool. All right. So does that mean that they can have the best, the flamers? Cool. Okay, flamers. Let's look at flamers. They can Overwatch good. And I'm like, okay, so there's no support for Overwatch in this book. There's no Overwatch. Make Overwatch more better. There is no Overwatch twiceies. There's no Overwatch phrases. Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong there as well. And so, okay, cool. They're not doing that. So, all right, cool. Melee. Let's go melee. They're not doing that either. All the profiles suck. And I'm like, okay, this is a book without a identity on the table, apart from being worse toughness than Marines. That's pretty much where I was at with it. So I'm very glad to see it. Very glad to hear from you two gents that the Balanced Dataslate has truly reinvigorated this faction. In addition, I think, if you correct me if I'm wrong, like many others, like several other factions, it wasn't so much about the buffs you got in the Balanced Dataslate, it was about who got nerfed that really opened up your ability to play the game again. Is that correct?
So I think single. Go ahead.
Scott. Sorry.
I was going to say the one thing that was good about having a weak faction without an identity to start is it forced dedicated Sisters players to really dig deep. And I think that is in part why you see some of the faction loyalists having some success currently. You look at, Mitch has been doing well. I've been doing well. McWhirp has been doing well. Brendan McKenzie. And now Jeff has been doing well all along. And those are, I think, 4 people who play almost nothing but Sisters. And I think that our struggle through the first part of 10th before the data slate forced us to be creative, so that when the data slate did drop, we knew the tools that we wanted to use. We knew the cool combos that we wanted to implement, and we were able to take more of it while our opponents were able to take less. And in particular, when you think about the changes to like Overwatch, for example, or Towering, those were big barriers to overcome for a toughness 3 1 wound army. So I think the data slate opened up a lot for us.
And very well said as well about building that faction resilience and that faction mastery before you even essentially get to play with a huge portion of your book. Sorry, Mitch, you go.
Yeah, I think everything Scott said is absolutely true, but I think there is one overarching change which completely reshaped how we play Sisters, which is the loss of dev wounds as a rule which made anti-tank guns randomly incredible into infantry units.
Completely agree, yeah.
And for an army of T3 inexpensive 1 wound bodies, dev wounds is about the most horrifying thing you could possibly imagine. But with it gone, a bunch of cheap 3-up saves that are always in cover because 10th edition actually is a bit of a problem to remove. And I found that 10 Battle Sisters or even 5 Seraphim are like a lot tougher than you think, especially when you add in Miracle Dice, potentially many Miracle Dice if they're near the Triumph. And that just little bit of just a little bit more durable than you want, actually I found has been very impactful in the modern Sisters meta. So that, above everything else, is the thing that made me the most excited to figure out the faction again.
Beautiful. Very, very well said, boys, and much appreciated. The enthusiasm, the passion rising up even. Badum, snare drum. Let's go. A time to review some army rules. First of which is Acts of Faith. I don't have time to read this, gentlemen. I just can't be bothered because I already know what this rule does, and it's very simple, but there's a lot of words here. So I will hand pass it to Scott. Give us the TLDR on how Acts of Faith works and what people need to know about this rule.
Yeah, absolutely. So we won't read all those words, but the punchline is Acts of Faith is how we gain and use Miracle Dice. So according to the army rule, we gain Miracle Dice at the start of every turn, and then every time an Adepta Sororitas unit is destroyed. There are other ways that you can gain miracle dice. One is having battle sisters on an objective at the beginning of your turn. You get 1 additional miracle dice for every battle sister squad that you have on a different objective. And then you can also, when you kill units from a unit that contains a simulacrum, you'll also get a miracle dice. And then finally, you can recycle some miracle dice when you use cherubs. Now, these miracle dice can be used once per unit per phase. So, for example, if I had 2 units that wanted to use a miracle dice in the shooting phase, they could. Each of them could once, but no more than once. We'll get into units that allow us to kind of break this rule, and I'm referring to the Triumph. And then the other way in which that miracle dice are not used, but rather utilized in a different way, is you can discard them for certain stratagems or abilities. And the miracle dice itself is, rather than making a roll, you substitute the dice you would roll for a miracle dice. And you can substitute a dice in an advanced roll, a battle shock test, a charge roll, a damage roll, a hit roll, a saving roll, or a wound roll. So notably, you can't substitute it for something like number of shots for an exorcist, for example. But that's generally how miracle dice work. Anything to add, Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. The only thing I'd add is, while that sounds like a cool rule, the practicalities of it is that it's a very cool rule. And even into players at tournaments who'll say, oh, I played Sisters a bunch, I routinely surprise them by doing something with miracle dice they didn't expect, like failing a save, for example. Yeah, you can do a lot of cool things with that rule.
So the rule is fantastic. In fact, we have seen this is the Fate Dice Lite. I think we all called it when it first came out. Well, the first incarnation of Fate Dice at the start of 10th edition, which is not where it is right now, praise be. But it is still a phenomenal rule. You get to break the rules of the game. You get to have set results for things. You get to do things with purpose, with certainty. And that is just so empowering in a D6-based game. Now, a lot has been said over the different iterations of Miracle Dice since the Sisters of Battle have become their own codex. Some have had not enough miracle dice. Some have had too many, and they're useless. I think that was at the end of 9th. I just saw players with like ending the game with 15 miracle dice of 1s, 2s, and 3 denomination because all the 4s and pluses have been used for everything. Is there too many, not enough, or just right in this incarnation?
So, at the start of the edition, I would say there are way too many. You would be in the same situation. I've got all these 1s, 2s, and 3s, and it's even worse because in 9th edition, a low roll was good for morale. Now there's no good low rolls in the game, right? It used to be, I got a 1, great, I'll pass morale once. So at the start of the edition, we all thought, okay, there's tons of these things. They're pretty worthless. Like, we're happy when we get a 6 or maybe a 4 or 5, but like otherwise, they're just going to sit in the tray and not be relevant unless they need to make a tiny advance. But nowadays, we've found a few tricks. And I'm sure we'll probably get to them, but they're, I like to call them miracle dice dump units. Most good lists will have 1 unit that can just eat 5, 10, 15 miracle dice in 1 or 2 activations and just dump out all those garbage dice into spectacular results. So anymore, I'm ending my game with no miracle dice because I have a way to just dump them off, even the bad ones, when I need to.
How intriguing that you've actually gone. You as the player base have been like, okay, we have this resource we can't use. So how do we actually change how we play the game to get value out of it? Because this is a core rule that is extremely powerful. And yeah, anytime I would be sitting there frustrated, as a Sisters player, being like, I have all these things that would do stuff for me, but no outlet for them. So that's very intriguing to me. They've gone the back way into making this rule work for you. Scott, any more to add from your side of the street about things people should know or interesting points about Miracle Dice?
I think there's one thing that's still in contention is when you substitute a Miracle Dice for a roll that involves more than 1 die. So what I'm specifically referring to is a charge roll, for example. I have a unit coming out of reserves. I want to make a 9-inch charge. Great. Well, I can only substitute 1 dice for my act of faith. So I'll substitute a 6 and I'll rely on myself rolling a 3 for the charge. But the question still remains, at least from Games Workshop, is whether or not if I fail to roll a 3 on that first roll, when I CP re-roll, do I get to keep the miracle dice I used, or do I have to re-roll both dice? And there's an argument for the possibility that you can keep the dice, in that in order for a dice to be re-rolled, it has to be rolled first. But miracle dice explicitly say that you never roll a dice, you substitute a dice. So that, rhetoric led to, I think, FLG, UKTC, and then other local tournaments ruling that you can keep the dice on a charge reroll. But I think WTC has ruled the opposite. So you have to reroll both dice. So that's still up in the air.
Easy. Then that sounds perfectly reasonable, I think, to debate about. I mean, I think at the end of in 9th edition, it was reroll both, yeah?
9th edition, the rule allowed you to substitute both dice.
Yes, that's
so
right.
it was never an issue.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So it wasn't a big deal at all. All right, moving on. We have the Detachment, which is Hallowed Martyrs, and the Detachment rule therein, the Blood of Martyrs, and everyone will know this one because it's become a bit of a meme, especially in certain matchups, say versus Admech. Each time a Sisters or Adepta Sororitas model from your army makes an attack, add 1 to the hit roll if the model's unit is below starting strength, and add 1 to the wound roll if you are below half strength. For the purposes of ability, if a unit has a starting strength of 1, it's considered to be below half strength, or it's lost 1 or more wounds. So you hurt me, I get more better. You hurt me lots, I get even more better, is essentially the way this reads. Both good buffs, both are quite relevant, especially, you lose 1 model of a unit of 10. That's 9 other models that, hit on with +1 hit, possibly hitting on 2s. Is this a good rule? Go, Scott.
Oh, that's a loaded question. Is it a good rule? Well, I would say that at its face value, it doesn't seem like a very good rule for 1 wound, toughness 3 bodies that are very prone to dying before they get to benefit from this rule. But I think this is also a space in which players have tried to come up with ideas as to how to benefit from this rule. And there are, I think, a couple of unit types that are more likely to benefit, and which is to say survive long enough to benefit from being below full strength or being below half strength. So looking at things like your tanks, Castigators, Exorcists, they take some chip damage and all of a sudden they're +1 to hit, which is really nice if you're shooting indirect. Or things like Arco-flagellants, which are surprisingly durable. And they can actually kill themselves if they decide to attack with hazardous weapons. And then all of a sudden, instead of hitting on 4s, they're hitting on 3s, which is a big mathematical difference. So, personally, I've incorporated those kinds of elements into my list, and they have seen more benefit from the detachment rule. But a lot of other, I think, units are less likely to benefit just by the nature of Sisters being relatively fragile. That being said, we, like Mitch alluded to, we can always manipulate miracle dice to keep units alive. And maybe out of those 5 battle Sisters, you hang on to that multi-melta so that when it shoots back, it's got +1 to hit and +1 to wound.
Absolutely fair enough. And on those terms, it does look really good. But you're absolutely correct about the resilience issue. So let's say you have a unit of 5 Sisters of Battle. They're not, 5 Sisters equivalents, toughness 3 up save. They are not getting a lot of return for this. So at 1 unit, at 1 model dead and 2 models dead, sure, they're getting it. And then 3 models dead, well, there's 2 models with, debatable weapons hitting with +1 hit, +1 wound. The return is maybe they're still acting like they have 3 or 4 models there, but that's still not pushing it past the boundaries of what it would be. Should it be 5, etc. Mitch, anything to add on Blood of Martyrs?
This rule gives me faith and hope for the Sororitas because it is so colossally bad that when we get any detachment rule of any value whatsoever, imagine how good our faction will be. That is my take on Blood of Martyrs.
That is both a much more pessimistic and much more optimistic take at the same time.
You failed both correctly. Well done. All right, jumping into the stratagems. I'll stick with you, Mitch, because you had such a short reply. Tell us about Divine Intervention.
Oh, gosh. Divine Intervention. Is this our resurrection strat? It is, right? You're making me remember their actual names.
Yes.
So Divine Intervention. This is one of the 2 best strats in the book. It's one of the best strats in a lot of books, honestly. Goes like this. 1 CP. If a character dies, it comes back to life with 1 to 3 wounds, with you discarding 1 to 3 miracle dice. So discard 2 miracle dice, comes back on 2 wounds. Any unit can do it except for Celestine, who has a built-in come back to life on full wounds on a 2-up, which is just unreal. Like, if your Triumph dies, nope, not today. If you're the one good use for Blood of Martyrs, if your Palatine with the Blade of St. Eleanor, which is a special enhancement, dies, when she comes back on 1 wound and she's hitting a +1 hit, +1 wound. So, if you get shot when you're standing on an objective by Tau, well, you're going to stand up at the end of that shooting phase, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's really, really good. You'll use it every game.
we have seen this like effect be added to every faction that can take it. Votan is putting it on Einherjar champions. We have the Phoenix Gem being taken at every single Eldar list. It feels like forever. It hasn't been. It's been like 6 months, but it feels like forever. The fact that you have a one C. Sorry, this is a one CP strat. We should read that out as well. And it's in any phase. There's no. Psychic phase. Movement phase. Something I don't know. Somehow, it doesn't matter. It's any phase. I think this is one of the stratagems in the game that everyone should know about because it can bite you in the butt.
Don't knock the movement phase, man. Don't knock the movement phase. If you want to run at that stupid demolitions expert in GSC who loads bombs at you, die and charge her anyway. It's
exactly
great.
Right.
Waste those What was that other phase you mentioned? The psychic something?
Never heard of it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that is. We don't do that here.
We do not?
No. There's that psychic phase. Yeah. It's hallowed antiquity. Never to be heard of again. We should never see its like. But anyway, moving on. Tell us about Light of the Emperor, Scott.
Light of the Emperor, I would probably rank among our worst stratagems, but we had some pretty good ones. Light of the Emperor is a 1 CP stratagem you can use in your command phase, and what it allows you to do is, and it's only on units that below starting strength. Mm-hmm. And what it allows you to do is ignore any or all modifiers to its characteristics. And I would say that the most useful circumstance for this is if you need to, instead of paying 1 CP once per game to pass a battle shock test, you can just actually use Light of the Emperor. So if they fail their battle shock test, you can ignore the modifier to reduce the OC to 0. Similarly, for against Tyranids, if they do their once per game kind of forced battle shocks across the board, you can use this on your unit so that you can still retain control of your objective even if you fail their battle shock test.
So I think is there a way to use this? Is there a way to use a stratagem on a unit that's battle shocked? Because that's what I thought you couldn't use stratagems on units battle shocked.
So it's before you can use it before you roll the battle shock test.
Oh, of course, that's right.
So then if you do fail, then your OC, you can ignore the OC modification to 0.
Very cute. I like that a lot. Does this ignore -1 damage?
So I think that's still debated. I think recently, what was it? It may have been one of the Warhammer events that ruled that stratagems like this that ignore modifiers don't allow you to ignore -1 damage or armor of contempt. I don't know. Mitch, can you speak to that any further? I thought there was a recent ruling on that.
I don't know how a particular event ruled. It's standing guidance that however a judge rules it, even a GW sponsored event does not make it canon. My read of the designer's commentary is that an attack counts as a characteristic. It says as much in the commentary, and this says ignore characteristic modifier. So my instinct says it should work for ignoring half damage, like on, for example, the Incarn. But ask your TO.
Yep.
Yeah, ask your TO. Because that is literally the best use I can see for this. It's just such a unique bandwidth. 1 CP for a thing that is hurt but not dead, to then ignore modifiers in a meaningful way. So it's pretty.
And in your command phase, so you've got to think way ahead, unless it's the morale thing. Yeah.
Yep. It's very, very strange. Anyway, Holy Rage is the next one. 1 CP. It's in the fight phase. 1 Adepta Sororitas unit from your army that has not been selected to fight this phase. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes a melee attack, add 1 to the wound roll. 1 CP plus 1 to wound. I don't hate it. Don't know how it's going to come up or it's going to be necessary, but I love that it's 1 CP slap down, hit harder. Sounds pretty good, really.
It comes up a lot. The 2 most common use cases are, we'll get to them at some point. Arco-flagellants have twin linked with 4 or 6 attacks each. And so when they're wounding on 5s instead of 6s with full rerolls, that bends the math quite significantly. It's just like, hey, tank, here's 25 saves. Do your best.
Yeah, we were going to do like less than half of this, but now here's 25.
Right. And then the other use is if Morvenn Vahl and her paragons charge into a vehicle, their weapons are mostly strength 6, strength 8, which means into most T 9, 10, 11 targets, they go from wounding on 5s to 4s. That's also quite material. So you do use it a lot. It's like a good just thing to have.
Fair. Well, skipping yourself then, Mitch. Scott, tell us about Spirit of the Martyr.
Yeah, so this is a 2 CP stratagem for Fight on Death. So, and you can wait until the enemy unit selects the targets of its attacks. And I think notably the way that Fight on Death works is that you are allowed to fight on death with 1 model at a time rather than the whole unit. So the way that works with our detachment rule is that say you have 10 Arco-flagellants and you fight on death. So the first one that dies, the unit is at full strength. So there's no +1 to hit. There's no +1 to wound. The next 5 are fighting at below starting strength, so they will get +1 to hit. And then the last 4 are below half strength, so they'll get +1 to hit and +1 to wound. Should your opponent, manage to kill 10 Arco-flagellants in one activation. At least that's how I interpret the rule.
And I mean, that is not too. I mean, if they come in, they wipe out the whole thing in combat. It's very easy for you to do, right? You roll 1 that hits differently. Then you roll 4 more that hit better. Then you roll 5 more that hit real good. They're pretty simple. Is that your read of it as well, Mitch?
Yeah, it's a good strat, but at 2CP, it's a threaten your opponent with it more than you use it strat, which is fine. Yeah.
Wave that flag of, hey, I can do this, and then, do it very infrequently. Suffering and Sacrifice is up next. This is 1 CP. Actually, no, sorry, we're going to leave this one for Mitch. I'm going to do Rejoice the Fallen, which is the next one, 1 CP. Use this stratagem in your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has resolved its attacks. 1 Adepta Sororitas unit from your army that has 1 or more of its models destroyed as a result of the attacking unit's attacks. I love reading attacking units' attacks. Yay, the English language. You can shoot as if it was your shooting phase, but it must target only that enemy unit when it does so. And if doing so, it has to be an eligible target. So 1 CP, just shoot back. They shoot you, you shoot them back. I like this stratagem quite a lot, and this is yet another one that I have this in Dark Angels, and I tell my opponent about it lots and lots and lots, and use it very, very rarely. Are you guys the same?
Yeah, I think there's So first of all, you have to note that a model has to be destroyed. Yeah. So you can't really use it for your tanks. But I think the one use case is the Battle Sister Dialogus Palatine Triumph combo. Because if you've got a squad of in total 12 sisters and you pick off only 2 or 3 of them, we'll talk about this combo later, but it allows you to shoot back with your Meltas, which are going to be surprisingly more damage than you would think a Melta can be. So I think that's probably the best use case for this stratagem. But like you said, it's more of letting your opponent know you can do it so they don't shoot your unit.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, Mitch, Suffering and Sacrifice. Tell us a story.
Thank you, Adam, for giving me this one. So Suffering and Sacrifice is a 1 CP stratagem. Here's the way it works. At the start of the fight phase, you're going to nominate a unit, and anything within engagement range of that unit has to punch it. It can't punch anything else. So even if it's base to base with some other unit, if it's within an inch of the unit that you use this ability on, that unit's getting punched instead. This is a phenomenal stratagem for controlling the fight phase, especially a faction that has 25-point Crusader units and 30-point characters and cheap Battle Sisters all over the place. I believe this is probably the second best stratagem in the game for its utility and power to control the outcome of a match, behind only Phantasm. So bold statement, but it's very good. Very good.
It is exceptional. Now, this was an effect that we saw pretty judiciously in books in 9th edition. I know Blood Angels, it was a bread and butter. It was literally one of the bread and butter Blood Angel stratagems that they used. Jack Harpster won LVO using a similar stratagem. Black Templars had a version of it. I know there was a couple other armies that had versions of this.
So
this now seems... So we were racking our brains. Yeah, this now seems to be the only one, right? Of this ilk.
I don't know any other factions, Adam. What are you talking about? I don't know of any other factions that have it. Yeah,
barking up the wrong tree, Scott. You go, mate.
No, I don't know of any.
What do you think of the stratagem, though?
Oh yeah, I'd echo what Mitch says. It's an incredibly powerful tool. I mean, you can just send Crusaders into Angron or the Incarn. Well, not the Incarn. The Avatar, and just tie it up for turn after turn and not let it do anything. You've got a big melee army charging down your throat, and all it's going to do is swing at a couple Crusaders or a few Battle Sisters. It's an incredibly powerful tool.
Now this gets better the better the smaller the footprint and the better the model gets. Yeah, having having like 6 units of sisters, just like pillow fighting Angron's ankles. And then he's like, I literally have the attacks to kill everything in this zip code, but I have to kill these 2 Crusaders. I'm not allowed to touch anything else. Just these 2 Crusaders get all my wrath. I think that is just hilarious to me. But then at the same time, I think about this as, a unit of Primaris Crusaders in Black Templars. I'm like, well, I just try and maneuver my army, keep my army either spread out or condensed, depending which one's going to help, and don't let you get too many guys in base contact with anything. And then it loses a lot of value. Is that safe to say?
I mean, you don't use it like all the time when a random unit gets charged. This is most useful, like when you say, Adam, like you mentioned with Angron, when you go into a Death Star unit, you just want to make it not work. Like a brick of 10 Terminators is about the best thing that a modern Sisters list will see, because I'll send my flat 3 damage Palatine into them and you will never punch her.
Yes.
While she slowly kills him over 3 or 4 fight phase activations. So it's a very good stratagem for those kinds of targets.
And if you're,
sorry,
I generally use it. I would say more commonly in an offensive manner. To keep a unit alive, but in my turn, there's one thing to remember about Arco-flagellants too is their base width is less than an inch. So you can get into some kind of fun scenarios there where if you have Arco-flagellants in the front line and a couple Crusaders kind of base to base behind them, if there's a, one big target charging those Arco-flagellants, all of a sudden, again, they have to swing at the couple of Crusaders standing base to base behind the Arco-flagellants. But there's some niche cases.
Yeah. So as for talking now, that's all 6 stratagems, as everyone else gets. Talking about the stratagem package, there's a little bit of nothing here to buff shooting. Actually, there's literally nothing here to buff shooting. Don't know what to tell you, but there is quite a bit here to buff melee. And as we know, melee was not where the game was played for the first bit of 10th edition. Is that one of the big reasons that this book suffered? You just have like half your stratagems just do nothing if it's a shooting matchup?
I mean, I think the reason our book suffered is because in 9th edition, the book was Meltaguns and melee, and then both were neutered materially. I don't think the stratagem support was the major problem. I actually think our stratagem package is above average. Like if you ranked strictly stratagems, I think we're like top third or top 25% as a package of 6.
If you compared like for like melee strats, like for like, I think absolutely you come out ahead. My 2 issues here. There's not a single thing to buff shooting and not a single thing to increase durability. And those are the things that I always look for. I look for things to make better shooting, better combat, better melee, and or better speed. And I don't see 3 of those. And yet this is still a good stratagem suite. So it's actually quite interesting to say, because there is a bunch of things, a bunch of very unique things here. The one that I do not have, where is my Trinity? Where is my Holy Trinity, people? I wanted a strat to make the gun good, to make the Flamer, Melter, Stormbolter combo, or one of those good, because that's been such a core tenet of the identity here, and it is entirely removed. And I'm hoping it comes back in the Codex when they get a few more detachments. But does that stick in your core as well, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. Not to say that we relied on the spreading the Holy Trinity in Bloody Rose, for example, but it was a piece of the fluff that was missing.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the enhancements. I'll do the first one because it's the easiest. Nightly example. This is Adepta Sororitas models only. I'm not going to say that again because it's in the Adepta Sororitas index. Be very surprising, GW said Orc models only. When the bear is destroyed, you gain an additional D3 miracle dice. I'm quickly going to pull up the points while we are chatting about this, but is this one that gets taken by you, gentlemen?
Saintly example is only 10 points, I believe, or maybe 15. It's real good because if you combine it with Divine Intervention, your character dies, explodes in a Fountain of Miracle Dice, comes back to life, dies, explodes in a second Fountain of Miracle Dice. So unless your opponent is taking Assassinate, feels real good to go get your characters killed. It's a pretty solid one. Very good.
It's 10 points. Yeah, exactly right. So it is not breaking the bank. Scott, tell us about the next one.
This is probably our best enhancement. And when I say probably, I mean it is our best enhancement. Is the Blade of Saint Eleanor. For 15 points, you can add 1 to the attacks, strength, and damage characteristics of the bearer's melee weapons. So this is best utilized on a Palatine who has base 4 attacks, AP 2, damage 2, its strength 4. So that bumps her to 5 attacks, strength 5, AP 2, damage 3. So it's one of our few sources of damage 3 in the fight phase, first of all. But if the bearer has lost 1 or more wounds, then you add 2 attacks to the strength and damage, or add 2 to the attack, strength, and damage characteristics. So all of a sudden, if you have a Palatine who is killed and you stand them up with Divine Intervention and they're down to 1 wound, you have a 65-point model that has 6 attacks, AP 2, at strength 6, damage 4. So it's an incredibly powerful enhancement, particularly when you take it with units that can augment the output even further.
And then, of course, when you stood her back up, she is below half strength and she'll be +1 to hit, +1 to wound as well.
Exactly.
Absolutely incredible value. So that brings her up to 80 points for the package, 65 for the Palatine, 15 for the Blade.
No, 65 includes the Palatine is 50 and the Blade is 15.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Yes, Adam, we do remind our opponents of the points tally every time she kills a brick of Terminators by herself. Every time.
You should have nice things. I like this. This is a very good sword. This is incredible. Possibly the best sword in the game in context, as in the best melee buff in the game in context, enhancement wise. Tell us about litanies, please, Mitch.
All right, Litanies of Faith. So this one is pricey. This is a 25-point enhancement. And I'll raise my hand and say, start of the edition, I thought this was an auto-take. And yet I've almost never taken it after trying it. But basically what this thing does, if the bear is on the battlefield, you can reroll 1 miracle dice from your command, from your miracle dice pool at the end of your command phase. So pick up a dice, reroll it. You don't like that too, reroll it. Hey, it's a 6 now. Also, as a bonus, if the bearer is injured or is leading a unit below half strength, you get to reroll 3 miracle dice instead of 1, which is pretty great. But the problem is 25 points is also 2 Crusaders. So it's often hard to find the points for this, and I end up cutting it every time I add it to my list. But it is fine for what it is. You
are one of the very few books that has increments small enough to that.
Yeah.
Enhancements are directly proportionate to units, and so actually you have a issue no one else has in that respect. I think only Tyranids is the same. Like they have Ripper Swarms and little nonsense they can just chuck in if they've got the points instead of enhancements. Scott, do you take this one?
No, I think that I think I had the same impression as Mitch to start. Maybe it would turn those 1s, 2s, 3s into more valuable dice, but frankly, it's not worth it. And we can talk about the ways that we get rid of those lousy dice anyway.
Well, sticking with you, Scott, tell us about the last one, Mantle of Ophelia.
Yeah, Mantle of Ophelia, I'd probably say, even though I don't take litanies, I'd say Mantle of Ophelia is probably our least taken and worst enhancement. So it's a Canonist or Palatine model only. For 20 points, then each time an attack is allocated to the bearer, change the damage characteristic of that attack to 1. For a 3-wound model, it's not terribly impressive, and only 3 wounds need to go through. And often these characters, either you want them with one of the other enhancements, particularly the Blade of St. Eleanor. So the use case and the value is pretty low.
Yeah, if you had like a generic Morvenn Vahl, like there was a Canoness in a Walker where she had a decent toughness and wound value, this would be great. Or like a tank commander or some crap like that equivalent. This would be phenomenal. But yeah, like you said, low toughness, low model count innately makes this very valueless. Like you're just going to die regardless.
And there's the Canoness is a once per game ability to take a 2-up invulnerable save for the phase.
Yes.
So, initially it was like, oh, this is kind of cute. We can take a Canoness and give it the Mantle of Ophelia. And for a whole phase, it's really hard to kill. But frankly, it doesn't really do anything beyond that.
Yeah,
I would go so far to say as this relic is an act of heresy because the Sororitas want to die for the Emperor. If you're busy living, what are you doing with your life?
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. So as for the enhancement suite, Mitch, where do your points go? Is it certainly example in Blade of St. Eleanor? I think Blade of St. Eleanor is the auto include here, but it's certainly example the next one that makes the cut, and then the other 2 are just never heard of.
Blade of St. Eleanor's been in every list I've ever written because there's always a Palatine or a Canonist who wants it. I will include that model for the Blade, happily.
Yep.
Saintly example is I have 10 points left over, neat. And I have a character that can hold it, neat. Sure, that's where those 10 points go. But I wouldn't build around it.
Easy done. Scott, much the same?
Yeah, absolutely. And you should never make a sisters list that's like any less than 1995 points. You can always find a 10 points here somewhere.
I love hearing that because that's one of the most frustrating things I've found with 10th edition. Just there's some armies that I really enjoy that just cannot make a 2,000 point army. Well, they can, but you know what I mean? Like the army I want to play can never be 2,000 points. The archetype or the list I want to build can never be 2,000 points. It's very infuriating for my sensibilities. Anyway, that is the end of the rules portion of this. And as we do when we get to this point, I turn to these gentlemen and I give them a purview of 3 data sheets each to tell us about, to show us through, to give you guys information on what 2 faction experts think is good and we need to know about and they need to unpack for us. So, bit of info for the budding sisters player out there and also for the people who may be getting punished by them on the tabletop. We'll start with Scott. Give us a data sheet of note for the people out there that we can unpack.
Oh, boy, Adam. So there's one combo that requires 4 data sheets, but we'll just start with one data sheet here. We'll keep it simple. The Arco-flagellants. So the Arco-flagellants are a 2-wound toughness 3 model with no armor save, but they do have a 4-up feel no pain. they move 7 inches, and at base, they can attack 4 times per model at weapon skill 4 with sustained hits 1, strength 5, twin linked, damage 1. If they choose to make their weapons hazardous, then they get 6 attacks per model. So you have pretty much a bucket of strength 5 attacks without AP and a bucket of incredibly efficient wounds. You can take 10 of these for 130 points and get 20 wounds with a 4-up feel no pain. And I believe this is probably one of the most annoying things to kill for the opponents, and probably one of the most underestimated units in our book right now. Not only do they put out a bucket of attacks and have a bucket of effective wounds, but they also can just glom things up. There's 10 bodies on an objective. They're useful for suffering and sacrifice. And you're taking, I think a lot of the folks that we talk to in the Sisters Discord are taking 20 or 30 of these to great effect.
You talk about the units that are the miracle dice sync. These guys just seem like they are purpose-built CP sync. Like, how many CP do you have? You could probably use all of them on this unit. They kind of are a perfect platform for taking to the sky. With +1 to wound, fight on death, etc., etc. I like this unit a lot. I think it's exceptional. I wish it had a 1 on the AP value, and then I think you could literally take it to the moon. But the fact it's still takeable, like at AP 0 in the current game, it means it is just how good it is.
Adam, if we get a codex that
has a bloody rose,
detachment that gives us just one little pip of AP.
Oh boy,
these guys are dangerous.
Oof. Mitch, what are your thoughts on the Arcos?
I think Scott has it exactly right. He and I have been running 30 Arcos as the heart of our list for a little while now, and they are phenomenal in every way. The only thing I'd add here, Adam, is you've kind of fallen a little bit into the trap, which a lot of people that I talk to fall into, which is they say, oh, it's only AP 0. And the most important thing to understand about Arcos is their combat profile is neat for shredding low save units, but the most important thing they do is not die. And by having a unit that doesn't die, Sisters didn't have this unit in 8th or 9th edition, or even early 10th when dev wounds were more dangerous. Now that we have a unit that doesn't die, our whole playstyle can change, because you can just shove these things at people and they're not dead. And you can be pressing primary and not getting your other unit shot. And that raw value, they could have 3 attacks or 2 attacks and I would still take 30. They're that good.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the unit of 20 Battle Sisters is gone. Yeah, you can only take 10s.
Yeah, exactly 10s.
Yeah. So this is the equivalent wounds of 20 Battle Sisters. It doesn't have a 3-up save, as a 4-up save, because it's got a 4-up feel no pain. But it's on the feel no pain side of things, so it's actually a little bit better than an armor save. So actually, funnily enough, this is quite a decent comparison for saying, well, I didn't have 20 Sisters of Battle, but I can have 10 Arco-flagellants. How many points is it for 10 Sisters? Is it
100 points.
Yeah, for 30 more points, you get double the wounds. That's a price point, boys. That is an absolute value point.
Here's a fun fact. They are the second most cost-efficient effective wounds per point unit in the game of 40k. They are barely edged out by Nurglings, who have 4 wounds each on tiny cheap bases. But in effect, 4 effective wounds per model at 13 points per model is unreal. It's like they're 3 points a wound or something silly.
It's really quite good. All right, Mitch, sticking with you, give us one of your data sheets.
All right, Adam, we go back a ways. Can I cheat and have one unit that's actually 4 units? Is that okay?
Well, one of you is going to do it. So let's just get out of the way.
All right. Thank you, sir. So I'm going to nominate the Battle Sister Squad. And a lot of people who are not following the hottest and latest in Sisters would be like, but Battle Sisters have been bad forever. But let me tell you why. So the Battle Sister Squad, when combined with some tricks, gets a little silly. So you take this unit of 10, you give them multi-melt, a melt gun, and an Inferno pistol. And, strength 9, hitting on 4s, it's going nowhere. So now you add a Palatine. So now the squad has lethal hits, combat, and in shooting. Then you add a Dialogus, which says when you use an Act of Faith, that miracle dice is changed to a 6. So a 1 or a 2 is a 6 every time you use it. Now, I just said that we have lethal hits. So wouldn't it be great if I could use a lot of miracle dice and make all of my hits lethal? So if you stand near the Triumph, which I think the Triumph has her own category, and we should not talk about her here. But one of her buffs is use as many miracle dice as you like within 6 inches. So you walk these girls forward. You don't roll 3 dice out of your miracle dice tray, and you say, "Here's 3 lethal hits from my Melta-shots." And every failed save, and it's AP4, is 6 or 8 damage if you're in Melta range. And these girls will just casually kill a Land Raider without breaking a sweat. Here's 3 saves. Oh, you can't make 2 6-ups? It's dead. They are just unreal how much they kill into units that don't have great invulnerable saves. And then when you're done killing a unit in the shooting phase by just miracle dicing it to death, you charge in with that Palatine, and she has 5 attacks. So you pick up 5 more miracle dice from your tray, and you usually have a lot of miracle dice by round 2 or 3. This is a real thing that can happen. And you say, "Here's 5 lethal hits. AP2, flat 3 damage. Oh, and also 5 mortal wounds on top of that because of a data sheet ability." And suddenly she's killed like 3 or 4 Terminators all by herself.
This unit is starting to sound like the pizza base of your choice. You know, you get your pizza base, you put a little passata on it, and then you just make of it whatever you need it to be.
Yep.
That's extremely exciting for a Sisters player.
Oh yeah, and then of course so let's say you're playing Chaos Knights, you shoot one to death easily, you charge and punch another to death easily, and then when that third Chaos Knight comes to clean you up, you Overwatch it to death because your 6s are all lethal hits.
Yay! No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done this. I've killed 3 Chaos Knights in like 1 battle round with this unit. It's phenomenal.
Wow. That is crazy. Scott, anything to pontificate in addition?
Mitch explained it perfectly. The only thing I'll add just for kicks is should the next Chaos Knight be within 12 inches of a multi-melta or a melta-gun and decide to shoot your Battle Sister squad, you will then spend 1 CP to shoot back at that knight and pick up 1 more while we're at it.
Absurd. Absolutely absurd. And terrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrifying.
And you got to chew through 8 wounds before you get to the good bits, right? Because it's 10 Battle Sisters. So
then when you get to the good bits, you know, they can all get back up and do other nonsense. And it gets even stickier from there. All right.
Or
Scott.
you just use your Shield of Faith and drop 1 more miracle dice to pass that 6-up save that you might need to keep the multi-melta alive or what have you.
That's true. Yeah. Scott, where are we going from here? Give us another data sheet.
Oh, let's see. I think one of the Humble Crusader squad, perhaps. No, maybe we'll skip that one. Let's go with the Exorcist. You know, I think actually you can cut this part out. Let's go with Morvenn Vahl in her war suits. Let's put those together. Yeah.
Juicy.
So it's actually very interesting you guys are saying that, because that's how actually I've had to, as an analyst of the game, I've had to start. You can't just look at a character and evaluate a character. Like when I see an army list, I can either not look at the characters and just look at the units, and then I can assume what characters will be there and usually be pretty close, or the other way around. Because there's everything comes with its combo. There is no, I'm just taking it because it's good. It can go with anybody. No, it goes with this. Like you don't have an apothecary biologist in your unit, you know, without the aggressors, etc. But anyway, tell us about Morvenn Vahl, mate.
Yeah, so Morvenn Vahl, the Abbess Sanctorum, the High Lord of Terra, she kicks butt on her own, but what really makes her shine is when she joins a group of Paragon war suits. And it's probably, I would say, the biggest hammer that we have in our army outside of this, that cool little combo that Mitch just described. So just going over Morvenn Vahl, she is in a Paragon warsuit, which means she has a 2-up save and a 4-up invulnerable save. She is toughness 6 in her warsuit. She's also 8 wounds and OC2 for what it's worth. So her weapons are Fidelis, which is pretty much a fancy heavy bolter. It's strength 6 instead of strength 5. And she'll be hitting on 2s with it. And then she also has a Paragon missile launcher, which either has a kind of weaker version of a Melta that's only AP2 instead of AP4, but at 36 range, or it can be a blast weapon to kind of clear some chaff.
I just love that you do not know what a missile launcher is, because it just doesn't exist in your book, because this is just a missile launcher. So the type in missile launcher.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. Well, there you go.
Off the Terminator.
Well, it's a Paragon missile launcher.
Everything has to be related back to a Melta.
Right. The Holy Trinity. How is it related to the Holy Trinity? That's what we need to ask ourselves.
Adorable. Sorry, mate. Continue.
No, that's fine. So Morvenn Vahl, her melee weapon is the Lance of Illumination. And it has a strike profile and a sweep profile like a lot. This is also one of our other access to a damage 3 melee weapon. But more importantly, her abilities. So while this model is leading a unit, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, you can reroll the hit roll and you can reroll the wound roll. So Morvenn Vahl managed to maintain some of her, prior greatness from 9th, where she gave out full rerolls, but now she can only give it to the squad that she's leading, which will be a squad of Paragon Warsuits. So the Paragon Warsuits themselves, again, move 8 inches, T6, 2 up, 4 wounds apiece. And they'll often be equipped. They can be equipped with your choice of the Holy Trinity, but you'll be equipping them with multi-meltas. And then they also have swords that are strength 6, AP 2, damage 2, or a war mace, which is strength 12, AP 1, damage 3. AP 1 is not very attractive, but when you have a squad of warsuits that have the vehicle keyword, it's really nice to have a war mace that is strength 12, so that when you roll into a charge, you can use tank shock and most of the time roll. So I think this unit out of reserves. I think it's challenging to maneuver vehicles and walkers around walls and get the most out of your movement. So what I like to do is put them in reserves and either rapid ingress them safely or bring them out of reserves in my turn, using a 6 on a miracle dice for a charge if I need it. And then hopefully I roll that 3 and I'm playing at an event where I can keep my 6 on a CP reroll for the charge if I need it. And don't forget that this unit, can benefit from all the other things that the stratagems that we talked about. So +1 to wound in melee. And like Mitch mentioned, strength 6 and strength 12 are nice break points. And as well as Morvenn Vahl's strength 8. And then can fight on death, which is awesome with full rerolls. Or even Overwatch with full rerolls. So, 6 melta shots coming out of the warsuits plus whatever Morvenn Vahl shooting means that full rerolls hitting on 6s is not too shabby. I think
So do you take the storm bolters or the grenade launchers?
That's a very hot topic in the Sisters Discord. But the punchline is storm bolters are high enough volume that they're decent at killing the chaff and their intended target. The grenades, if you do the math into a lot of targets, might be marginally better. But I think you can argue either way, is the punchline. I think one thing I wanted to point out is for her Fidelis and Lance of Illumination, her Righteous Repugnance ability, Morvenn Vahl says once per battle in your command phase, this model can use this ability. If it does until the start of your next command phase, add 3 to the attacks characteristic of Fidelis and the Lance of Illumination. So generally speaking, in the command phase where you're going to use her, either your turn after you rapid ingress or the turn that you anticipate she'll be coming out of strategic reserves, you can use this ability even if she's in reserves because it does not necessitate that she's on the battlefield. And then she'll be shooting more of her fancy heavy bolter, and when she does connect in melee, she'll be get 8 attacks at weapon skill 2, strength 8, AP 2, damage 3 with devastating wounds. And damage 3 devastating wounds is really nice into those Terminators, Custodes, those kinds of things that we have a difficult time breaking sometime, particularly with full rerolls. So
nice. Okay. Mitch, one more from yourself, mate.
Ooh, okay. So I'm going to go in a different direction. We've been talking about stuff that slaps. Now let's talk about stuff that shoots. I'm going to pick the Castigator battle tank. This babe is 140 points. She is T10, 11 wounds, so she's just like kind of a standard main battle tank. She comes with 3 heavy bolters, which are heavy bolters, 5-1-2, with sustain hits 1. And she comes with a top gun. It can be either a battle cannon or an auto cannon. I'm going to talk about the battle cannon because it's the one I prefer, but this is also a little bit hotly debated. So the battle cannon is D6 plus 3 blast shots, strength 10, only AP 1, but flat 3 damage and ignores cover. So it's a true AP 1. Yeah. And it rerolls the hit roll against vehicles and monsters. And at strength 10, it's wounding all infantry on 2s. And that is a cool profile at 140 points, but it's not mind-bogglingly good. The sneaky trick behind the Sisters book is when you're putting so much pressure on from your Arco-flagellants and your Battle Sisters and your Rhinos and your Immolators, these things often fall pretty far down the priority queue of things you have to deal with. So they're often just pounding away for like 2, 3, 4, or Emperor help you 5 turns. And they just end up doing a lot of work and kill a lot of chaff. And what Sisters like to do is kill all of your chaff so you're not scoring points. My chaff is awesome. I'm scoring points. And then I kind of beat you on secondaries. And the Castigator plays a really important role in that game plan. So Cassie for life. All my lists run at least one. I've bought my second one. She's on the paint desk right now. A very, very good unit in this incarnation of Sisters.
Also can force some battle shocks, which can be cute. And at
Yeah.
140 points, I think it's pretty adequately costed. I think it's probably about right for what it is.
Yeah. The autocannon's cute too. It's 4 shots with rapid fire. So 48 inches, so rapid fire in at 24. So it's 8 shots inside 24 inches. It's AP1, but no Norse cover. So it's really like cheaters AP1. Like it never actually happens. But it gets reroll hits against infantry and it's twin linked naturally. So reroll all hits, reroll all wounds in infantry is quite nice. And has there's a case we made for it too.
Damn, that's actually quite nice. Yeah, I like that too. I suppose it was sounding like it's going to be a meta pick. But anyway, on to the last of the data sheets we'll be unpacking. Scott, take it away. Where are we going?
I think let's go with the humble Seraphim squad.
Okay.
I think we talked about a lot of damage pieces, but I think the Seraphim squad is one of the staples of scoring pieces for us. It's great into the meta elves. Elves don't like hand flamers. These come in squads of 5, and 2 of the girls can be equipped with 2 hand flamers apiece. And we're not talking any old like normal hand flamer here. We're talking Minisotrum hand flamers. So they are strength 4 as opposed to strength 3. They ignore cover, d6 shots, damage 1. So it's nice into the elves, but more importantly, they have the shoot and scoot ability, which allows them to in our book it's called Angelic Ascent, but it allows us that after we shoot we're allowed to scoot 6 inches. So I find it really, really useful for example, if an opponent is being a little bit lazy about how they're towing onto an objective, well, I'm just going to move 9 inches away from them, shoot them, and then scoot onto the objective to steal it. Or if it's turn 2 and God forbid you draw behind enemy lines and you can't bring in your Crusaders in their deployment zone, then you can kind of plop these ladies down about 6 inches away from the deployment zone, shoot something, and scoot into the deployment zone. They're great for a screen, move block, Overwatch in some cases. So I think they're a really valuable utility piece for 70 points.
Yes, I'm about to say 70 points is a bargain. Essentially, they're bringing the similar utility to, I guess, Inceptors, but they have the scoot instead of the 3-inch deep strike. I think they're absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I never build a list without at least one, but almost all the time at least 2.
All right, that's going to bring us to the end of the review portion here. We got one more thing we do with every index before we wrap things up. Mitch, out of 10, right here, right now, so not pre-data slate, out of 10, how happy are you with this index now?
12.
12 out of 10 happy.
I got to say, Adam, I've obviously been playing Sisters exclusively for a very long time. I started collecting in 3rd edition. I played competitively in 8th and really 9th and 10th. Sisters have never been this fun to play. They've been great in the past, but they've never just been this enjoyable. With Arcos running around, flailing the living daylights of everything. Battle Sisters are viable. I'm playing Paragons finally. There's just so much fun to be had in putting these girls on the table. Genuinely as fun as it's ever been for me. 12 out of 10.
Well, I do totally agree. And I think the other iterations where I think Sisters have probably been stronger than they are now, but it's always been a very solved book, a very solved build, very solved equation. Yep. Where I feel like this is the kid in the candy store. We're very much in the forming or before the norming stage of change here for the Sisters, where nothing is really set and you can kind of do whatever you like. Scott, how about yourself? How happy are you out of 10 with this?
Oh yeah, I'm very happy. I'll echo Mitch's 12. I feel like
you both suck.
I don't think that we are. No, I'm being serious. It's not sarcastic. It did come across that way though, didn't it? Anyway,
no.
I think that we are in a great spot right now. I don't think we're overtuned. I don't think people, walk up to the table and see Sisters and say, "Oh, I gotta play Sisters." People didn't like playing against Bloody Rose sitting behind a castle in a ruin. And I feel like we are much more engaging. The list diversity, like you alluded to, is incredible. People are finding success with all sorts of builds, not just the 30 Arco-flagellants that Mitch and I have been using. The play style is very different than it was, I think, last edition. And I have a lot of fun putting them on the tabletop. I got tanks, I got girls, I got prisoners that I'm sending off to die. I think it's a good time to be an Adepta Sororitas enthusiast.
Yeah. I mean, that last book, I remember, so I played Space Marines and or Grey Knights for all of last edition. And I remember the Sisters Codex came out. And then within a month, the Bloody Rose list was built. And then I remember at the end of that entire edition playing the exact same build. It did not change. In the bones of that list changed maybe 200 points in the 2 or so years it was released. It was really quite dull. I wouldn't look at Sisters players lists when I matched up against Sisters players at events. I'd be like, cool, playing Sisters. It's either Bloody Rose or it's worse than what I think it is. So there's no reason to look at your list. It was just, it was quite, surely it would have gotten quite stale and boring for you. So no wonder you guys are so enthusiastic about this at the moment. All right, so the last thing we do is we rate where they're sitting right now competitively on our tier scale. So traditionally, the D tier up till S tier. So Mitch, where would you put Sisters in the competitive lexicon right now?
So I'm incredibly biased for sure.
Really?
But I think, well, I had to preface this because everyone's going to disagree with me. But I think if you assume hands of a high quality player, I think Sisters are A+ tier. I think there are a few factions better than us, notably CSM and Elves. But I think we have game into those factions, and I think we can beat any other faction in the game if played properly. Like, I don't want to say comfortably, but with a reasonable chance of success. So I generally think they are a lot better than most people do right now. Our meta rep's 1%, so no one even knows what we're talking about yet. Mm-hmm. But generally, A+ tier.
What about yourself, Scott?
Before Mitch said A+, I was in my head thinking A, but I guess I'll just leave it at A. I don't have to agree with everything Mitch says. But yeah, for the same exact reasons, I think that we have. There's not a lot of matchups where I feel like I'm really unfavored. And I think there are a couple tricky ones, but I do think that we have play into a lot of matchups. And I think that our play into L's and CSM is a lot stronger than other factions. So I'd put us at A.
I totally agree. I think it's an A faction, A tier, and it's being proven, I think, by a very, like you guys have said, a very small player base, very dedicated, and it's very interesting to see. I wonder if it's going to catch on because there are a lot more Sisters players out there, but they're all eschewing and playing other things right now. So we'll see how many you guys can attempt to come back to the fold over the next, days, weeks, months, whatever. But on that note, we will wrap this up. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me. Please go over and enjoy some Sister Act 40K. When's your next episode coming out, mate? This episode is going to be coming out on Tuesday. Will your next episode be out by now, or?
No, our episode will be out probably early November, first couple of days of November. We just did an interview with Jeff Klodner, the guy who won Tampa, going 8-0.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Fan-freaking-tastic. Go over and enjoy some of that. Scott, you going to a tournament soon, or you got anything coming up?
In the Midwest of the United States, there's not too much going on for the winter months, but I will be going to LVO. So I'm still hoping that I might be able to steal the #1 ITC spot for Sisters, but we'll see.
Excellent. Love to hear it. Thank you very much for coming on again, gentlemen. We'll see you over in part 2. Hopefully you will join us there over at Patreon at AOWdu. If not, thank you very much for your time, your ears, and hopefully you have been entertained and informed. And we'll see you next time on AOWdu. Take care. Say good night, gents.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to Art of War Down Under, a content review podcast for Warhammer 40K. Hosted by Adam Camilleri. Produced by Seamus Ronan. Enjoyed the show? Want your lists reviewed and the content you heard put into practice? Sign up to our Patreon and connect with us online or on Facebook. Just search for Art of War Down Under. Signing out from tomorrow.